The investment in the more human side of people can certainly pay dividends as a leader, particularly if you're willing to demonstrate that you care about the level of authentic human connection you're able to build with those that you hope will follow you and your lead. Well, according to Forbes, leaders and executives have more work to do. The publication reports that only 53% of employees today believe that their bosses truly value their opinions and place integrity behind them. Ron Ross is a dynamic speaker, consultant, and facilitator who specializes in creating happy, humorous, and high-performing teams. Ross believes, as a leader, it's important to place value on the human side of leadership. You see, Ross believes that if you humanize yourself as a leader, those that you are in charge of leading will be more likely to follow your direction if you prove that you're invested in them outside of the office and giving them an investment stake when attempting to accomplish the same goal. Ross has dedicated his career to creating successful cultures and group dynamics. Ross believes that it's important to peel back the layers of the onion of interest when it comes to investigating what really makes your employees tick to elevate their performance. Case in point, if you're invested in them, they'll be invested in the process of production, both inside and outside of the office. And Ross joined me this week to tell me more about elevating employee engagement, establishing long-lasting and sustainable relationships, and building a bond of trust with your employees so that you can maximize their performance. I'm Kevin McShane. Let's have this conversation. I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to talk to you this afternoon all about employee engagement. Great to see you this afternoon, and thank you so very much for being here. Ron, I know that you're a consultant and a speaker, and you help people sort of find their way through employee engagement and really giving them the tools to build a humorous, productive, and thought-provoking workforce. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about all the good work that you do.
Absolutely. I am more than happy to get into it, Kevin. So my wife and I have a small consulting business. It's called Avant HR Solutions. I've been in business this is going to my 8th year, but we rebranded under Avant HR Solutions. And we work with small to medium-sized businesses, and we primarily focus on trying to help those environments to really focus on the human side of the business. We feel like our clients know the technical side. They know how to produce widgets. They know how to deliver fine healthcare. Where we augment what they do is in helping them to create those environments and cultures where their employees feel like, hey, I love what I'm doing. So they can be like you, Kevin. They want to be all in, give their full effort. That's what we do. In fact, we just completed our first book under the enterprise called Inspire Me, which is all about dialing in those new things that leaders need to be able to do so that they can create the cultures where, employees can thrive. So that's a little bit about what Avant HR Solutions, and I'm one of the consultants, and my wife Josie is another consultant that does work for our organization.
Well, fabulous. And, I'm glad you brought that up because, no matter what field of work you go into, work is all about being able to connect with people and building teams and relationships that can relate. So tell me your secret to helping leaders sort of humanize themselves so that they can get the most out of their people.
What a fabulous question. Fabulous question. I would say it starts off with really getting right with yourself as a leader. People want to follow people who know where they're going, that have a true sense of north. Like where you're going may be different than where I'm going, Kevin, but people want to know, what are you about as the leader? And if you have that figured out, and then you are a decent person and you treat people really well, call it love, call it care, call it compassion. When you put those things together, and then there are these action things that we've identified that people need to do. People want to feel like you're noticing the work that they're doing. So if they're working hard on a project, paying attention to how they do it, how well they're doing it, or if they're struggling personally or professionally, they want leaders who notice that as well. They want to be developed, and they want to know that, ultimately you really care about them as human beings. So those are just some of the broad strokes. There's some details specifically, but those are enough to kind of get us started in a conversation.
Yeah, so let's dive into the conversation about creating a successful culture at work where everyone feels valued and a part of the operation. Because, Ron, when I talk to business people myself, I always tell them it's important to be invested in the process of your people, right, to create a successful culture. So tell me about, what do you think is the roadmap and the keys to creating a great work culture where everyone can thrive?
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the things I want to kind of say is there's the big organizational culture. So even if you're a company of only 100, which would be sort of a small company that's scaling up, or you're a company that has 5,000, there's the big company culture, what the organization is about. And then really what's key now, Kevin, is the microculture. Today's employees, you and I are talking to each other from different countries over this wonderful technology called Zoom. And this is how people are interacting a lot today in a lot of service businesses. They may only talk to 3 or 4 people repeatedly every week. So the culture is not the culture of the organization. Really what matters is the culture of the team that they work in. So really just understanding the context of what we're talking about. We have people now who are working and they don't ever really see physically. They're not in the same room with the people that are on their team. So the culture really is defined by the people that they repeatedly have interactions with day to day, week to week. So that's just from a context perspective. Then once you kind of understand that, one of the keys, you said it, is employees want to feel like, hey, you understand how to communicate and talk to me. And if you understand sort of my own way I process stuff, the way that I've been raised, my unique cultural background, you understand diversity. That's one of the keys to really inspiring and creating, great employee cultures. The other thing is, do you make people feel included? So people who are, if you're a female in the organization and you aspire to be into the senior ranks of leadership, Does your organization make the female leaders feel included? If you're a Black man, does your organization make those folks feel included? If you're somebody that maybe you're not sight dependent or you are deaf, does the organization make those folks feel included as well? So that inclusion and belonging is a big part of what makes people really feel like, hey, they're really engaging me. And then I'd say the final thing is, are you investing in people? Are you looking out not only for them to be able to do a job today, but do you see a career trajectory where you're willing to invest in them so that they can become contributors in your organization, not only today, but 5 years from now, willing to not only put them into classes, that formal training, but to do what we call delegation or that apprentice type leadership where you're saying, hey, this is not your job now, but let me show you what I'm doing. Let me help you to understand why this is important, because someday I see you as my potential successor. I see you have leadership potential. I see you have the ability to communicate with others, and I want to start training you now, even though that's not your job.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ron, you brought up the concept of diversity, so I'll follow up with this question. Ron, I don't know how much research you did on me, buddy, but I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. Simply means that I don't have enough oxygen to walk normally without assistance. But I've dedicated my adult life to helping organizations better infuse folks with disabilities into the workforce. So I wanted to ask you about the importance of having a diversity of perspective when it comes to infusing folks with disabilities into the workforce as well, because I truly believe they can bring a different perspective to the workforce. Would you agree with that?
I 100% agree with like what you just said. When we think of diversity, too often we think of it only in terms of gender, race, maybe religion, but sort of, ableism and understanding people who are different, like yourself, is really key. And here's what I think. I think if there's one positive that came out of the pandemic, is that we now realize we don't have to physically have people in work, which, work requiring people to physically come to the office for certain people, it's a huge challenge. Now we know that if we equip people with the right things, we've opened up the candidate pool to so many different people. And I think, to your point, when you are born with a different perspective, I have a good friend of mine who he says, he lost his sight really early, and he says, you sight dependent folks. So he's always teaching me that my perspective is someone who depends on my eyes for so much of my perceptual data. His way of solving problems, his way of seeing things is completely different from me. And when I'm in relationship with somebody like that, he brings a way of problem solving, a way of seeing the world that enriches my life. I think when we open up that sort of scope in terms of like diversity that includes people from all different spectrums, it truly does open up our problem solving abilities, and it makes us better as organizations. It makes us better as teams. And we know the research really bears it out. Is like when you have that diversity of thought, when you have people who've had to overcome certain challenges, they bring a different heuristic or problem solving methodology. And when you really listen to that, you really supercharge your team. So I'm for it. How you do it, like just bringing somebody in that's different and diverse, but not making them feel included, not equipping them to do the job, not really allying for them, is not doing it to your fullest. It's a start. But what we know is diversity alone, without making people feel like they belong, doesn't really make the difference. You have to have a diverse candidate pool, have diverse employees, but then you have to do the extra work and find out, what does this person really need to feel really included in the environment? And how do I include their perspective in the conversation? So I love the title for your podcast, because it truly is I think at the heart of it is we have to be in constant conversation with people to really maximize diversity. And I know that was a long-winded answer to your short question, so I apologize for that.
No, as an old journalist, I love a long-winded answers. Ron, I'll tell you a quick story. So, my journalism coordinating professor always took only when I submitted articles or stories for journalism. She would write on my assignments. You don't always have to write a novel when you give me an assignment, right? So I appreciate long-winded answers, okay?
I appreciate that, my friend.
So, Ron, you brought something up that interests me in terms of, workplace bias and getting over common sort of getting out of our comfort zone in terms of talent development and looking at what special strengths that others can bring to an organization. So what do you think is key to reversing our thinking when we're recruiting and trying to retain talent as talent managers or HR professionals?
Yeah, I really think I'm going to be a really redundant, because I think it truly does start with having a conversation with ourselves. We all have biases, right? And our biases simply come from human nature. Biases, when you really understand them, come from this part of our brain, this mechanism, this perceptual system that we see patterns, and those patterns start to form biases over time. We all have them. And then when we add sort of culture, we add race and all these other things, we all have them. We're not talking about them. And it's sad that a lot of the politics today is really forcing people to polar sides of the equation. And really what we need to do is we need to be talking about owning our own biases, doing what we need to do to feel comfortable around people who are different, to ask questions. I've never been in an environment where somebody is different. If I ask the right question, if I'm truly coming from a place of curiosity and judgment where they don't want to share their unique journey, unique perspective. And that's how I start to appreciate, I start to value when I'm in a conversation with somebody whose journey has been completely different from me. So whether it's somebody who's had to deal with some type of physical disability that makes their work journey completely different from me, or somebody, their thinking style is completely different than me. So maybe they're neurodivergent, or somebody that's grown up in a different part of the country, different part of the world. I can start to ask those questions. I can start to really challenge my own bias only when I admit that, they're there. And I think when we admit that they're there and we start having questions or start being curious and start having conversations and being open, that's the road to really start challenging some of the biases that you talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Ron, there's a saying that I live by when I talk to business people. I always tell them that life is a constant game of networking, right? And people don't know you're out there unless you put yourself out there. So tell me about the importance of networking, specifically for people who are trying to get into a new space, because they really don't know what you have to offer until you put yourself out there. Would you agree with that?
I 100% agree with what you said. It's hard to do, right? It is not the come from for everybody. Part of what I do, which is more of an avocation rather than vocation, it's a small part of what I do is I do a little bit of career coaching, really more mentoring. And one of the things I talk to people about is, yes, go on LinkedIn. Yes, if you see a job, you can apply for it, but look at it not so much as a job that you're going to get, because if there's a job on LinkedIn or one of the job boards, there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people applying. Really, the key is to have conversations with people. So I was just having this, someone who is someone I've mentored before, she reached out to me and she said, "Hey, I want to change." Just the conversation, the question you just asked me, I said, okay, we walked through a lot of things. I said, but you have to up your networking game. And when I started asking her questions, like, what are you doing? I'm like, email is not networking. That is a great start. Email to have a conversation, to get on someone's calendar. People are going to remember you. Like, we'll remember each other because of this short conversation that we had, much more than if this was an email or some type of asynchronous exchange. I think there's nothing that replaces real-time synchronous conversations. And sometimes it's just asking questions. If you want to get in a new space, talk to someone that's in that space already and ask for advice, not for a job. Tell me about what your day-to-day is in XYZ. What are the challenges? What do you love? What are you thrilled about? And then I would say the other thing, besides doing some of those informational interviews, really putting yourself out there, is starting to take some of the classes of people that people would take that are in the discipline that you want to get into. So, for example, we were talking about this idea of project management. And one of the things that project managers need to do is they need to be able to facilitate. Now, I used to teach, and I still do a lot of facilitation, but I used to teach a class on facilitation. I'm like, if you want to have a networking opportunity that's very relaxed around other project managers, come to a class where they're learning too. Now you're both in the learning space and you're in these small groups and you're doing things and you're at lunch together. What a really cool way to network and to learn without the pressure. So those are just some of the things that come to mind when I think about like networking and putting yourself out there, doing something that gets you to learn and doing that uncomfortable thing of asking someone to have a conversation, asking for advice.
You know, one of the tenets of my life that I live by, Ron, is that you have to be a learning sponge. And I always tell people, the day you stop learning is the day that you die, because no matter how many degrees or plaques they have on the wall with your name on it, you can always learn something new from somebody else, right?
Yeah, 100% agree. I consider myself a lifelong learner. I want to keep learning. I read constantly. I write. And I like to talk to people who have different perspectives. And the key to being a sponge is to find your own learning. What is the way that you learn best? I learn best by conversations. I'm an extrovert. And not so much that I love being around people all the time, but I love to challenge my ideas. I love really thought-provoking questions like you've been asking and being able to talk it out and hear someone else's perspective. I love to read from people who can really put things out there. And actually, my wife and I, we do this crazy thing where we're watching TV, even just relaxed TV, we'll pause it. And if we're watching something like a cooking show or something that's a little silly, we look at the team dynamics. We're looking at how people interact. So even when we're in our downtime, we're still like in this learning mode and we're challenging each other, which is pretty fun. Sometimes it's a little tense because we don't agree, but always in learning mode for sure.
Well, disagreement can spark debate though, right? So it can be a good thing as well.
Yeah, you got to know how to disagree, right? That's really the key. It's not that you disagree. It's not even that you have arguments. It's people need to be taught how to have a disagreement of ideas and not to be disagreeable and really cantankerous with each other, which is hard because your learning style and how you learn growing up, how I learned growing up, it's cultural. It's also some families are very stoic. They don't really disagree with each other. And then you have some families where debate is part of the dinner table. And then when you put these people in the work environment and they don't have a central way to process ideas, it can become tense and very uncomfortable. So one of the things that leaders have to do is they need to be comfortable with really creating conversation in groups. And that's one of the things that I talk about in my book is like, there are skill sets that we are not born with that teach us how to facilitate group conversations effectively. And when you're leading a team, you want the best idea to win, not the loudest person, not the most passionate person. Sometimes the person with the best idea Kevin, is the person who is not likely to talk up very much. And if you have a process that allows that person to get their voice out there, and then you have a mechanism which you're validating people, and then you have a process in which ideas are really talked about, and you're really arguing and you're prioritizing based on the ideas and not who said it, that's when teams win, because now they're fighting for what's best and not really, it's not a popularity contest. And that's process stuff, and that's also skill, and it's also learning. So I'm loving sort of like the questions that are coming to your mind and what you're asking, because it's getting me excited, because it really dances over some of my beliefs and some of the experiences I've had, and some of what, in my coaching and consulting practice that we're teaching our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Ron, I appreciate the compliment for sure. And I wanted to also ask you about resilience in business and in leadership, because, my moment of resilience, Ron, happened when I was 9 years old in a hospital conference room. I had the last surgery for my disability, and the doctor, my pediatric doctor who had performed all of my surgeries for my disability, he had put myself and my parents in a conference room, and he was going over the successes of the surgery and what they were hoping to gain. But at the end of it, Ron, he looked at me and he told myself and my parents, who were also in the conference room at the time, unfortunately, Kevin won't be able to walk for the duration of his life because he has the most severe form of cerebral palsy. And, the next day, Ron, I had to go back to school, and I was called down to the principal's office, and I credit my middle school principal. Her name was Dr. Carol Crowley, and she knew the previous day why I had to go to London to meet with the doctor. And she called me into her office, and she had left a big circle in the middle of her office for my wheelchair. And my parents were there, and everyone that was assigned to my file, from teachers to social workers to therapists, were there. And I had gone through what the doctor had said the previous day about not being able to walk. And then she stopped me at the end of my story, and she said, "And you can accomplish anything in life, because the only limitations in life are the artificial ones that you place on yourself." So that, I believe, was the turning point in my life. I didn't know it at the time because I was only 9 years old, but I credit that as the turning point in my life. I'm 34 now, and I always use that as sort of my safe place when I have to go back and drill my own resilience out of myself. So it's a long way of asking you, how do you classify resilience at work, in leadership, and in life? I'm fascinated.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. There's this term called grit, which I think is just another way of saying, like, are you likely to stick to things or not? And there's just a lot of correlation to like this idea: when we treat people really well, when we give them opportunity to feel heard, when we include them in things, there is this rise of like grit and resiliency. I think some of it is through like events like your own, where it's codified like, hey, I've went through something tough and I figured out a process. I'm the type of person who can do tough things really well. Doesn't make it easy. And I think we all have those moments. One of the things that I do when I coach, and it's not unique to Ron, it's part of good coaching. It's also a good part of motivational interviewing. When you're trying to help people to activate resilience, trying to activate some type of thing in them that's going to help them to change. It's not about what you say. It's helping them to remember a time that they were able to do something to overcome. Another way of putting it is, you want to make the problem smaller and the person's resilience self-efficacy bigger. And it's not about your words. It's about helping them to tap into sort of a transformational experience from the past. And we all have them. I love that you went to 9, because a lot of the things in which we learn early on, and it either sort of jades us a bit, or if we learn, hey, we can overcome it, it gives us strength to try things that are a little bit tougher, a little bit harder. So a lot of my most impactful things are when I was in elementary school. I was early on and like pushing myself out there and being encouraged. And it gave me sort of that reservoir, that safe place that you've talked about. And I think part of it is teaching people to tap into it. I think we all have it. And as leaders, we all need it for sure. Like, the world of work isn't getting easier. We have more competitive forces. The fight for really good talent is really hard. The requests from the leaders at the top of the organization, from shareholders, and from clients, the demands are going up. So it requires employees at all levels to really be more resilient and have more grit. So it means that the leaders have to have it. They have to know how to activate it in other folks. And a lot of it is about helping people to remember and to know and to tap into their own sort of experiences that were really impactful, like you talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ron, I know that you're passionate about helping businesses succeed, especially those with social impact message and entrepreneurs. So I'm wondering why it's so important to you to invest so much time into assisting businesses with a social impact message as well.
Well, I think part of it is like who I am, and part of like who my wife is honestly, I love the work that I do. So, and if I was independently wealthy, I feel like this would still be the work that I'd be doing, that people would be calling me, that I'd be reaching out. There's some people who are meant to work with animals. There's some people who are meant to work with technology. There's some people who are meant to work with car engines. I'm meant to work with the human operating system. People, I'm fascinated by it. I've always been fascinated by it since I've been younger. And like, for me, what I'm passionate about is living in a world, Kevin, where people who come from all different sorts of backgrounds, who come from all different types of abilities, so all sorts of different diversities, that they can live and really tap into those talents that are innate to them, and not just to enrich themselves, but to make the world, their part of the planet, their neighborhood, a better place. There's just so much bad that we hear about, but there's so many people who every day they do one thing that helps other people to be better. And those are the folks I really want to champion. Those are the folks I really want to work with. I just wrote an article. I do a lot of work with folks who work in the home healthcare space. And they work with folks like you who maybe they need help with some of the daily activities of life, and they'll provide a home health aide to assist professionals who need to be able to do what they need to do, but they maybe need a little bit more support and assistance. Sometimes it's folks who are their disease, the thing that they're wrestling with, it's not going to get better. So it's helping sort of their family to deal with it in a very dignified way at home. And there's something about that work that I can relate to. There's a simplicity in, there's a client in need, there's a family in need, there's a caregiver who's capable, who's motivated, there's a clinician or a therapist who's very skilled and motivated, and matching those people up. That's good work to me. Good work is learning how to really abate mosquitoes in an area where it's causing disease. So it's not about like what we always think, that it's about education, it's about all these different things. It's a matter of, does the work that you do, the organization that you're working for, in the end, is there more to it than just profit? And if there is, and there is sort of a clarity that there's someone that's benefiting, I'm about it. I am. I'm a capitalist. I believe in business. I just don't believe business is in itself always altruistic if we're not really holding people accountable for doing some good in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also curious to ask you about creating a competitive advantage by listening to your employees and
Woo.
diving in, yeah, really diving into their personal story, right?
Yeah.
It's also important, isn't it?
It is. I have a whole chapter in the book. So my book is it's really 5 concepts. One is called inspirational communication, but under inspirational communication, the power of listening. People want to feel heard. They want to be seen. They want to be respected, and not just for being able to do a job. Like you said, what's their story in the background? Like, what do they bring to the table that if you just asked the question, if you gave a format that they could share, you'd be blown away, not only by their resilience, but just their creativity. So that the listening as a leader, it is foundational. And then you got to go further, not just hear the word. It is what we call sort of as coaches, as folks who are working with people, is that idea of listening from sort of a higher level. Like, what aren't they saying that I'm picking up? And I have to be fearless to really go after like the thing that they're not saying that they want somebody to go after. People want you to be curious. So then you have to have that curiosity match with that listening skill. And then you have to do what you've been doing, which is good follow-up questions. Like really listening from a place of not like, hey, I know what I'm going to ask next, but I'm going to let the question come from me being really in the moment and really paraphrasing and using these skills that we don't grow up doing. People, if we're lucky, we had a parent that modeled it, a teacher who modeled it, or we got trained to do it. It doesn't matter the level that you are in the organization, that ability to communicate, and most importantly, to listen to employees, I think it really sets the difference. People don't leave bad companies. They leave managers and supervisors who don't make them feel seen. And part of seeing people is understanding the story. I'm in this job now, but what I really want to do in this organization is this. And when people listen to that and they become champions for employees, man, does engagement go up. I'll do what you need me to do now because I know that you're on my side, that you're going to help me to get to where I need to get to. And you won't understand that unless you get curious about people. It has to go beyond what the job is of today.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry for the coughing fit.
No problem. I only have 2 other questions for you. And before I ask you my next question, life and business is all, in my view anyway, about rowing in the same boat. As long as you can show people that you're interested and invested in getting to the same goal with the same passion, they're more likely to do stuff for you, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely right. I think I gave a talk a few years ago. It was called, Leadership in Love, and you have to care about people at the human level. And I think when people feel that, it doesn't mean you have to be an overly physically affectionate person. It doesn't even have to be that you have to be someone who flowers people with like the words that feel so sugary. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying at the core, there's something about you that people know, hey, she cares about me. And if I say I'm struggling, but hey, I'm going through something personally, my family's going through something, they're willing to shift the agenda to really hear me, to make me feel heard. And I think when people get that and they know that, hey, like this person, I matter to them and it's not just about the job I do. Now, I'm willing to go in all for them as well. And if that means the next time, maybe I have to work a little harder. I know that Paul was willing to help me out, to give me a little bit of grace. So now Paul needs me to do a little bit more. Paul understands what I'm trying to do in my career. Paul's able to connect those things. Absolutely, people are willing to do things for you when they feel like you care about them. And I think that's one of the fundamental skills that I think leaders have to have. And you can't fake it. You can't fake it. No one can put you through a workshop if you don't have that human compassion, if you don't really care about people, if you don't care about the work that you're doing, people are going to see through it, and you can't technique your way through it. If you do care, there's certain ways that you can really amplify that caring through the right techniques and processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Ron, I'm going to combine my last two questions because they're interconnected. I'm curious to ask you about your final message to leaders about the importance of really diversifying their perspective, the power of vulnerability. And finally, I'm curious, when you look at your own life and legacy, how do you want that to be defined?
Yeah, that is really some really, powerful questions. I think for me, I'll go with the legacy. I think about that because I'm a little bit older than you. I'm 20 plus years your senior, and I see like my career. I can see the end where maybe you're in the middle or you're the first third, and I just want people to know, in my life. So the people that I care about, the people that I've been a paragraph in their story, I've been a word in their story, or I've been a whole chapter, a few chapters. I want them to know, hey, I cared about you. I did my best. I was as present as I possibly could. And when I wasn't, I didn't fake it. I apologize. And I want to bring joy. I want to make sure that people's lives are better for having me in it than not having me at all. And that's the legacy that I really want to leave, that I'm willing to give. But to me, it's defined, are people better off by having an experience with me? Because if they're like, well, it's neutral, not good. And if I'm detracting from people, then that's not the legacy I want to leave, for sure. So, and the whole thing about diversity of experience, I think that was the question, right? It was like diversification of like experiences. Was that the first part of your question? I know I answered the legacy part. So
yeah, diversity of perspective and really embracing different perspectives as a leader to grow. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's the game. it is the game. It is, and I mean that not from a trivial. It is at the heart. So it's the technical side of the business that whatever you're doing, you need to understand that, and your people need to do that really well. Whether you're in legal practice, whether you're in HR, whether you're whatever part of the business you're in, accounting, people need to understand the technical part of it. But we've been talking about the human side of it. And really what makes the human side, what makes engagement go, which makes teams better teams, is that diversity of perspective. The reason we get really great ideas and we have breakthrough, products and services is because someone has challenged the groupthink. They've challenged the norm and they said, why not? Or what about this? And someone was willing to listen. And that's why the teams that have more diversity, they have more belonging, they outperform their peers. And I think it's because they have the better ideas, because they have different problem-solving abilities, different perspectives, and they're challenging each other without challenging the ideas without really belittling each other. They're listening to each other, but they don't accept just those first few answers. When they're brainstorming, they really go for it. They really flip it upside down, turn around and say, what haven't we thought about? And they push themselves to excellence. But it starts off with that diversity of thought, having the right people in the room, setting up a process, and then you got to really listen. And then you have to have a way to really land the plane, to really bring all those ideas down to something that's really manageable, and looking around the room and having a process. Did we get it right? Are we missing anything? Can you support this? Yes. That's really where you get that energy and commitment. But it starts with having sort of that diversity of thought, opinion, perspective that we've been talking about really throughout this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Ron, tell me, if people want to get connected with you, buy the books that you've written, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, I would say get the book by going to Amazon. The book is called Inspire Me, Mastering the New Rules of Team Success and Employee Engagement. So it's actually, by the time this is released, it's being released. It's out in market now. I'm so excited, my partner and I. And to get in touch with us to find out a little bit more about the work that we do, AvantHRS.com is the best way to get in touch with us, or Ron at AvantHRS.com. So, Kevin, thanks so much for really having me to be a part of this. It's been a really great great questions, great conversation. I love sort of your ability to really be in a moment and ask really good questions. It is a art, it is a skill, and you have it, my friend. So I've really appreciated it.
Well, I want to thank you for your kind words and for engaging in conversation with me about workplace diversification, leadership, and employee engagement. My friend, your work in the space of time on my behalf is most appreciated, and I want to again thank you for joining me on a milestone week for the program as we record and release our 700th episode this week. So I want to thank you for all your great wisdom and insights and helping us mark a milestone for the program. It's most appreciated.
Thank you, my friend, and continued success for you for sure.